Hello, and welcome back to another episode of Gathering Crows podcast by Nathara. I am clearly Nathara, and it has been a bit because I am, as always, overwhelmed with thoughts and ideas and current happenings and things like that, and there's just a lot to talk about, and sometimes it's very hard to focus my brain. I am still working on the Christian default. I think I mentioned it previously that I had kind of fallen into a rabbit hole of the ex-evangelical community, which is a very fascinating place. If you are struggling with your personal relationship with Christians or Christianity or any of those other things, I do recommend you maybe consider checking it out. And that is ex-evangelical, just so you get the spelling on that right. Anyway, it's a fascinating community full of really introspective people, lots of information, and kind of a more inside view of what being strictly Christian is about. But today we're going to talk about ghosts. And this is kind of inspired by a meme that a friend of mine shared. And I don't mean to harsh on her. I don't want any of this to come across as mean or elitist or superior, but more like food for thoughts. The meme was basically about why don't mediums enjoy scary movies, horror movies specifically. The answer, of course, in the meme was because they already know that ghosts exist and that's not their idea of fun. And that's perfectly fine. If ghosts are not your idea of fun, that is very cool. I have been a hardcore horror fan my entire life. I grew up watching horror movies. I absolutely love them. I watch a ton of horror movies and series all the time. And supernatural and paranormal horror are absolutely my favorite genre above all the others. And if you know how much I love zombies, you know, that supernatural love is a lot of it. And it's been interesting to kind of think about why that is, why there's a trend online for mediums to not enjoy horror movies. And I can kind of understand, if that's your job, maybe you don't want to spend your free time doing job stuff. And I get that. I don't want to do any job shit in my free time either. Or maybe it's because you know the ghosts are really real. Or maybe you're offended on behalf of ghosts and dead people. And those are all valid. There's not any invalid reasons. But I've thought about it really hard. And one thing that occurred to me is that I really have a huge advantage in growing up with all this psychic, metaphysical, spiritual stuff. Okay, and I also want to add in here that when I say that I have a huge privilege or an advantage in growing up with all this stuff, I'm not saying it to brag or be elitist or anything. I just recognize that my view is very, very skewed. And one of those huge advantages is that ghosts were never scary to me. They can be scary in the way that ghosts are scary in Beetlejuice, in that they can do things that are visually frightening, make terrifying faces, mimic dead bodies and things like that. But other than being visually frightening or psychologically frightening, they can't actually ever do anything to you. And so I think that helps as a kid growing up to think of it as a little less dangerous. Right, because we mostly have things that are scary because they have startled us, like a jump scare, or things that are scary because we actually perceive them as dangers, or dangers to someone else who might possibly be a fictional character. And that's one of the reasons why I think it's really important to respect that people might not like horror movies at all, or horror media in general, because not all of us enjoy feeling like we're in some kind of danger. I do not. I think one of the reasons why I enjoy horror movies as much as I do is because I get all the creepy, spooky folklore things, but I don't get scared. I don't like being scared. I think being scared sucks. So yeah, I think it helps growing up that not only did I learn that ghosts are kind of just visual startle kind of thing that happens, but also I grew up learning how to handle ghosts. My mother taught me how to interact with them, how to avoid interacting with them. If I don't want to see ghosts, I don't see ghosts. And in fact, we had a haunting in our home when I was 10 or 11. And at that point in time, my mom told me, she was hey, if you don't want to see dead people, you can just sit down and decide to tell the universe that you don't want any part of this ghost business. You don't want to see them. You don't want to talk to them. You don't want to interact with them. You don't want them in your dreams. You just don't want to perceive ghosts anymore, and universe will handle that for you. And so that's what I did. For a really long time, I was just completely oblivious to any kind of ghostly activity that was happening. And it was just like a big blinder there. Then it took me years to get rid of the blinders. And as I got older and thought about it more and more, I realized that the one thing I really don't like about ghosts is the same thing I don't like about people. I don't like it when people come into my house and they're not invited. And they can be dead people, they can be living people, they can be people who were never corporeal in the first place. I don't like it. You're going to need an invitation or you're simply not welcome. That's the way it works. But other than that, I always kind of grew up confident that if a ghost were a problem, we knew how to handle it. There's so many different ways of getting a ghost out of your home, from non-understanding kind of strong-arming methods, like you can banish them, you can cast them out, you can kick them out. In my household, we did much more of the bang on pots and pans and demand that they leave. That works out pretty well for us. It works really well on living people too. Or helping them resolve whatever is going on and helping them move on. And so now I feel very comfortable in there are no ghosts here unless I invite them in. And I usually don't invite them in unless I'm doing some kind of psychic reading for someone and they want to contact like a dead relative or something. And then I have my process and procedure for allowing that to happen, to open things back up and inviting them in. And then if I do that process and procedure, it is absolutely an official invitation. And I'm comfortable with that. I like it. I think it's a good system. But I think knowing that even when I was younger, that ghosts can't actually hurt you. They can only kind of jump out and startle you. And also that a ghost can be handled and taken care of. And especially that my mom could do it. Like I wouldn't have to do it. If a ghost was a problem, my mom would handle that. I just had to complain about it and it would be taken care of. Really helped me to enjoy horror movies and kind of contributes to the fact that they aren't scary. Like I do my best to suspend disbelief when I'm watching a horror movie, because otherwise if there's ghosts involved or something, I go through the movie just like, that's not how that works. That's not how you do that. Don't you have any fucking salt around? Like, come on, just bless some water and get that shit everywhere. Like, dealing with ghosts is so easy in my perspective, from my brain, from what I learned growing up, that sometimes horror movies seem a little silly and overdramatic. But that's also the appeal to me on those. Like, they're silly, they're overdramatic, everything is overblown, and I can just kind of enjoy the fun ride. And I do enjoy spooky atmospheres a lot. Like, give me mist on a moor. Give me fog in a swamp. Give me the creaky boards of a really old house. Let the door squeak as it opens. Put cobwebs in those corners. I do really super hate spiders, but I appreciate the aesthetics of a good spider web. All those kind of things are super fun to me, but I do think that's because they don't pose any kind of danger. Now, I'm sure there are people out there who are like, hey man, that's not true. Ghosts can scratch you, they can shove you, they can break things and blah, blah, blah. And I feel like, personally, from my perspective, the entities that do that kind of stuff are no longer ghosts. They are, and I shouldn't say no longer, they weren't ever ghosts to begin with. They are not dead people. There is some other kind of spirit, some other kind of entity that is happening, but you're not dealing with a dead person in that case. You're dealing with something else. And I also enjoy the heck out of possession movies a ton. I think they're great. They're fascinating, especially since they almost always take place in a very, very Christian mythological concept. I think that's really super fascinating. There's not a lot of other cultures that have a negative association with possession. Super fascinating stuff. But yeah, so I think it's really fascinating that there's this, and it's not like a new thing. There's always been kind of this whole thing in the spiritual new age metaphysical communities about how trashy or low vibe horror movies are. Certainly not unique to the spiritual community, because I think most people feel like horror is pretty trashy and lowbrow. And like I said, I have loved them for forever, and that is definitely partially because my mother also loved them, so I grew up on them and they were around all the time and blah, 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 blah. But like, we tend to be more fond of things that we are familiar with. The instances where people super hate a song at one period of time, and then like years later after they last heard it, the opening music starts up and they're like, oh yeah, I love this song, and it's actually like the song that they hated for so long. That's fascinating stuff. But yeah, we tend to be more fond or feel more positively towards things that we are already familiar with. And that's just like a cool aspect of being human, right? So that definitely plays into how much I love horror movies. Let me not even go into how much I love horror movies that include witches in them, because like that is an absurd kind of thing right there. So I think it's really fascinating. But this whole new age spiritual community tends to have this view that horror movies, and to a lesser extent action movies, are very low vibe, very negative, that they'll kind of like bring your vibration down if you watch them and things like that. That is not a perspective that I shared. It always felt kind of very foreign. Like, if something makes me happy and makes me feel more comfortable, then I don't see how it can be inherently low vibe. Like, if I'm happy and comfortable and healthy, then my vibration is going to be like this theoretical vibration. My vibration will be higher than it would be otherwise, because that's what being happy does for you. I'm not really sure I buy into the whole vibes thing, not as like a metaphysical concept, but I definitely buy into the idea that I can get like a nasty feeling from someone or something, and I think those feelings should be paid attention to. What they're trying to tell you is variable and definitely up for discussion, but I don't think that things are inherently low. Like, morals and ethics is weird. I feel like the whole vibe concept really relies on like, if you do evil things, you're an evil person. If you do good things, you're a good person. There are no neutral things out there. So it's very black and white thinking. And I feel like context and nuance and all that is super important to the whole ethical, moral discussion of like vibes and whether or not someone is a good or bad person. That is a whole other subject for another day. I really hope that you guys out there are able to enjoy the heck out of Halloween. And for me, an important part of my practice and my spirituality does include ancestor veneration. That's a hard word to say out loud. I don't think I've ever said it. But it does include ancestor veneration. In fact, I have a whole specific altar in my home that is just set up for dead folks on it. And I was talking about this in a post on social media the other day, like, my ancestor altar is very much like a me thing. Like, I hadn't read anything about how to do it or what was required or necessary or the traditions behind it or anything when I started. And so I kind of just felt out what felt good for me. And like, the purpose of my ancestor altar is to keep those people in my life. So there's no one on my altar who I haven't met. And it is important probably to point out that some of the people that are on my altar who I do consider having met are people that I only met online and who I loved and had a great relationship with. I don't think that ancestors are purely a biological thing. I think we have ancestors of disciplines. You know, like, you can have a brilliant artist who inspired you, and that can be an ancestor of yours. Or culturally, that there are certain ancestors that you may not be biologically related to. If you love George Washington, he could be an example of that. You might not be related to him, but you might really appreciate his life, and that can inform your life, and so you can kind of consider him an ancestor, and that's fine. So I do have people on my altar who were just friends, or who are just kind of an inspiration, who shaped my life and who I am and things like that. It is not a very crowded altar. I do not want to imply that it is. It is a very simple altar, and I like it a lot, and it kind of facilitates a place where I can show my appreciation and love for those people, but also remain connected to them and have them part of my everyday life, which I think is pretty awesome. And I think it's really hard to reconcile, like, the idea that my my ancestors and my spirits and my gods and whatever are good, and I have good relationships with them and they're healthy and they contribute in a positive way to my life, but ghosts are bad. Like that's weird, and it doesn't feel like it goes together well. And that is just, I just wanted to put it out there during this Halloween spooky season that considering our relationship with ghosts, or the concept of ghosts, or the idea of the supernatural, and how we relate to various spirits in our lives should probably be related. And I'm fascinated to hear too how all you guys feel about that kind of stuff, like how you have resolved it in yourself. If this has given you any thoughts or ideas, if you think I'm a terrible person and I'm completely wrong, I would love to hear all those things. But I think it's fascinating. And like I said, the one thing I do kind of stick by is dead people are people too, and so they can absolutely be assholes. Just like living people can be assholes, dead people can be too. And so if you dislike a particular dead person, or if you dislike having dead people around in general because you're just not a people person, that is completely understandable. But that always felt kind of weird to me that like we would make that separation, like ancestors are good but ghosts are bad, or like people are good but dead people are bad. That always feels weird and incomplete to me. But we all kind of have to have our relationship and perspective on that, and experiences and whatnot. And so yeah, let me know what your thoughts are on all this, and I appreciate you listening. Hopefully I get this out in the next day or two. I'm not even gonna say what day it's on because I don't want you guys to know if I'm a big slacker or not. I hope you're having a wonderful spooky season. I hope you have a lovely Halloween or Samhain or whatever holiday you like to celebrate. And if not, I just hope you have a really lovely fall and autumn season. I gotta tell you, like, complete aside here, but we had these crazy winds yesterday, and so now there are beautiful, colorful fall leaves just everywhere in piles and just scattered about, and I forgot how much I love that. Like, fall leaves just being everywhere, and the trees changing colors and being beautiful, and the weather being cooler is so amazing. So I hope you guys are enjoying fall and autumn as much as I am. Again, I hope you have a wonderful spooky season, and I would love to hear your experiences. One last note. I have done the ghost hunting thing a couple of times, and I do have a lot of opinions on that whole culture. Like, I had terrible experiences with it that made me really mad, both personally and on behalf of dead people. And I think that's a whole other topic, how that's treated. But yeah, hope you guys are having a great season. This is Nathara at Gathering Crows, and I will be back again at some point.